Hello and welcome to the Built to Serve podcast. I'm your host, Mike Favre. I'm here with Corporal in the Marine Corps, Ben Armstrong. Ben, how you doing? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hey, man, I haven't been called that in years. I'm Ben Armstrong. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Outreach for Next Stop Veterans. We're a veteran employment nonprofit, and we've worked with performance on and off, I think, since 2015.
Oh, wow. Okay. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? Where are you from? Bring me all the way up until maybe high school.
Yeah, so from Thibodaux, Louisiana originally. Don't sound like it anymore. Left there in the early 90s. My dad was is an athletic trainer, and so we were around athletics my entire life. So he was at Nicholls State. He got hired by the NFL Europe. People might not remember that, but they had an NFL farm league in Europe for a while. So we moved from Thibodaux, Louisiana to London, England. And that was an interesting cultural change for me. And then lived in London for about 2 football seasons. Got out of there, moved to Arkansas, and then ended up in Alabama for high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I could be way off base with this, but you said NFL in Europe.
Yeah, NFL Europe, yeah.
But don't they call soccer football in Europe?
They do, but this was American football is what they called it. But they a lot of guys, John Kidna, James Harrison, Kurt Warner, they were all guys who played in the NFL Europe. But it was basically a farm league like they do in baseball. They created it in the 90s. It's still, some of the teams are still there, but it's not connected with NFL. But it was part of this push that you still see today with the games in London to push the NFL into Europe and, I guess, build their brand and get more viewers.
Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. That's a lesson I've learned today.
Yeah.
Wow, that's neat.
Google it. It's interesting stuff.
And
It's
you
very
mentioned
interesting.
Kurt Warner,
Yeah.
and I'm recently they just put out that movie about Kurt
about
Warner,
Kurt, yeah.
right? And him playing, I believe it was for the Rams, right?
Yep.
So you're saying prior to that, he played in the NFL league in Europe.
I'm pretty sure he was one of them. I know John Kidd and James Harrison. There was a lot of running backs. Lawrence Phillips ended up there for a while.
Okay.
It was kind of a if you're not ready for prime time, go over and play. If you want to get better in the off season, you'd be affiliated with an NFL team.
More like minor league football.
Minor league football, basically. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's something I'm going to have to definitely dig into.
Yeah.
So
there's a documentary to be made out there. They haven't done it yet. But,
that would be pretty cool. That would be
it's
pretty cool.
interesting.
All right. So you're into high school. Talk about your high school career. Did you have any aspirations of being something at the end, going to school? What did you have planned?
Yeah, I had no aspirations. I hated school. I felt like I was in prison for 12 years. I was my grandmother, who was an educator, would tell you I was a dormant student. I feel like I was intellectual enough. I just didn't participate in anything but math and athletics,
Okay.
the simple stuff. And played football, but then I think, and we'll get into this later, but I made a big decision to quit football and start wrestling because it was available at my high school. And that was a big change for me. And that kind of led me down the road to join the military. But that's really the highlights. I was an athletic trainer while I was in high school, like my father. So I helped with all the injuries and everything, or equipment around the football team, basketball, baseball, all those sports. But it was kind of I was a C&D student, and I was just ready to get out. I started working at flipping burgers.
Right.
And I made money, and I was like, this is a lot funner than being at school making no money.
Right.
So, just not a very illustrious high school career.
Yeah. And you said you were from Thibodaux, right?
Yeah, Thibodaux originally, yeah.
I've got family that lived in Thibodaux, and it's either you talk like you're literally living in the bayou, or where people can know that you're definitely not from there.
Yeah.
You speak a completely different language.
Yeah.
Most of the people who live there actually speak, Cajun French, right?
Yeah.
And my pawpaw, my mama, they barely even spoke English, so I completely understand. But so were you married right out of high school? Did you know you wanted to have a family? What?
No, I mean, the high school really persisted with me trying to get out of those walls.
That was your number one focus.
And I the Christmas of my senior year is when I made the declaration to my parents that I was going to join the military. I actually had a partial scholarship to Auburn to go be an athletic trainer through relationships my father had professionally, and I'd gone and done some camps at Auburn. I'd supported the football team in spring. I'd gone and worked in water boy and stuff like that, and I just knew I couldn't, like, I was not interested in academics, and I realized it was going to step up from where I was, and so we were watching a movie one Sunday, eating dinner. We were all kind of sitting around with TV tables, and I just look up and I just looked at my dad and I was like, "Hey," or I said out loud in the room, "I think I'm going to join the military." And my dad paused the TV and looked at me and he was like, What did you say?" And I was like, "I think I'm going to join the military. I just don't." I was wrestling at the time. I'd lost a bunch of weight. I'd really kind of pushed an understanding of what I physically could handle,
Right.
because I never really had to do it in football. It was a team sport. It wasn't individual. And he looked at me and he was like, "Okay, well, if you join anything, you need to join the Marine Corps because your grandfather was a Marine." And I said, "Okay." And then he put the movie back on and we kind of didn't talk about it. And then a few days later, he was like, "You got to go find the recruiters." And one happened to be walking through my school and I just bumped into him and he thought I was lying to him because I was the one student in my I went to Hoover High School in Birmingham, Alabama. And I was the one individual that went active duty in my entire 700 and some people graduating class, and just not a group of people that served traditionally. And we went and met with recruiters, and it was just kind of off from there. So I was in the pool, as you say when you sign up before you go out. I was in the pool from like December of '98 to August of '99. I didn't go to boot camp until after summer, and so I just decided to join the Marine Corps, and then my intention to my academics went lesser then because I was like, "Well, I'm joining the Marine Corps. I don't need any of this." But they were like, "You do have to graduate high school to get in the Marine
Right.
Corps." So, but no, that's kind of what the end of my high school career looked like.
Oh, wow. So during during the I speak from experience because I thought I wanted to be a Marine
Yeah,
too.
a lot of people do.
Yeah, right. Well, so the story of whenever I was questioning whether or not to become a Marine, this was even before I knew I wanted to join the military, but this guy comes walking through the school, he's
Yeah,
dressed blues,
the
he
uniform,
looks so
yeah.
cool. You're like, man, I'd love to wear
Hot
that.
business.
Well,
Yeah.
he's like, all right, so there's one thing that we have to do before we actually start talking to you about joining the Marine Corps. He
Yeah.
said, well, there's a video presentation that you must watch.
Yeah.
So he puts this video on, right? And it's the Marine Corps, the way it dresses, and then it rolls into boot camp.
Yep.
There's like 20 students in this one classroom that just get up
And
and
leave.
walk out,
Yeah.
right? I'm one of them.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to subject myself to being screamed at
Yeah.
and, all this, that, and other. So did you have to watch that video too?
No, I didn't have to. There wasn't a video, but I would tell you, screaming at me is probably my love language.
Okay.
I grew up around sports. I was around a lot of coaches
Oh,
and
yeah.
athletes, and it just doesn't affect me like other people. And I think it's a real testament to my father's career and then me growing up around sports because you just learn that there's intention behind screaming, and it's not just that they're mad; they're trying to get something done. And so I think at that point I was just hungry for adversity. I wanted more adversity, and I realized that the traditional path just wasn't for me.
Right.
And so why not go? They kept saying it's hard. You're not gonna fail this and other thing. Not my parents, but people were like, "Man, the Marine Corps is hard." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay, let's go be hard for a little while."
That's
And so
right.
that was kind of what it is. Again, I was just ready to go, and that seemed like the fastest way to get out of there. And it wasn't because I didn't like where I was at. It was just I needed more. And I had this epiphany that like I'm not gonna figure it out myself. I need to go give it up to something else. And it seemed like the Marine Corps had a plan.
Okay.
And so yeah, I joined and quickly was moving.
All right. So you're still in high school when you do boot camp, right?
No,
Or
I
was it the
graduated
summer
high school.
after?
Graduated high school.
Okay.
I continued to work, and then that August at the end of summer, when everybody was starting school, August 23rd, 2099, I went to Paris Island.
Okay. All right. So that day you're going to Paris Island. Tell me, did you fly?
No, we rode a bus from
All right.
Birmingham, Alabama to.
What's running through your mind on this? I mean, are you any regrets? Any, what's your mentality on this? However many hours it was to Paris Island.
Yeah, so I think we went to Montgomery first, and then we got a hotel room, and then we met up with all the other people, and then we drove from there to nonstop to Paris Island. I think it's 11 hours, maybe, I don't know. I do know we were in a hotel for some time with other guys that were coming from my area.
Mhm.
That I think our recruiters put us on a buddy program because they got money out of it. We really didn't know each other, but they're like they're all
Right.
buddies. They're joining together. It really all started out with at the time there was a Marine Corps commercial where the gentleman would go through a maze and he had a sword and he killed a dragon. And so jokes in the hotel room were like, when do we get the sword? When are we gonna kill the dragon? And it was really just kind of us. And I've always been a little humorous, and so that was really the conversation. The one thing I do remember is I've had migraines from overexertion and stuff like that in the past, and I got a migraine on the bus to boot camp. And I remember the bus driver, it's just us, and I don't really think there was a government employee. It was just a bus driver and just a bunch of guys who were going to boot camp, guys and gals, because Parris Island, they train female Marines as well. And I told him, I was like, hey, I need to take some medication or something. So we stopped at the gas station. I remember getting some ibuprofen. I took like double what you're supposed to take.
Oh, yeah.
I killed a bunch of water, and I actually got to sleep. And then I woke up and the headaches was gone, but we were on Parris Island when I woke up.
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, it was dark. We showed up late. I think it's super early morning, like 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. or something like that. And then it's just off. And so I mean, it was weird because I wasn't focused on my future. I was more focused on like my immediate need that I had a bad headache. And maybe that's God's way of keeping the adversity way. It's like, hey, deal with your immediate pain. Don't worry about the future. It's going to take care of itself. And so, no, it was just, I vividly remember walking into this very ill-lit gas station and looking for pills, and the woman wasn't selling them, but she had a bottle. And I told her what I was going to do, and she was like, well, you just take the bottle. And I was, because you're going to boot camp. And I did buy the water. I think I had the last little bit of money on me, and then we were gone. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if the military does that on purpose, whether it's all branches or what. It's like 9 times out of 10, the people that I talk to, whenever they roll up on their fort or their base or whatever for training, it's dark.
Yeah.
You know, you can't see anything. They don't show you where you're going or anything. So when you get to Parris Island, did they do any kind of processing before they roll you into training?
Yeah, it's a massive processing thing. They bring you in. You don't meet your drill instructors. You meet like light drill instructors that aren't like fully psychopathic.
Army's got the same thing.
Bring you in, kind of do the amnesty box, make a phone call. Did you lie to us about anything? Your recruiters have told you not to say anything. You're in a big room, silent. And then you basically start going through haircuts, supply simultaneously. I think they keep you up for 48 hours.
Okay.
And shots, medical, and everything like that. I do remember that we were getting Jimmy Dean like tray lunches that were like with a cellophane, and they were all frozen. So we were like eating these frozen sandwiches, and it had chips and a drink and all that stuff in it. But I remember like seeing that 4 or 5 times throughout this initial process. Like all of our meals were exactly the same.
Oh, wow.
And in the squat bays we were in, or the areas we were in, the AC was just through the roof. And this is August, and Parris Island, so it's hot. So it was outside sweaty, inside freezing. And then they finally, you get to a place and you're just, I think they do that on purpose to make sure everybody sleeps at the same time, and they sleep deep. So they get us to bed. They wake us up kind of soft the next morning, but they get us up. We have these 2 they call receiving drill instructors. They kind of walked us through the process, and then and I think it's 4 days. Then you're in front of your actual drill instructors, because they're giving you the remedial stuff, like how to stand online, how to listen, and how to answer, how to talk. We have to shift everything to third person.
Right.
It's a big part of Marine Corps training, or was when I was in.
Right.
And it's a blur from there. And then once you get with your regular drill instructors, you don't see it while you're in it, but they kind of phase the training from there. And looking back on it, you can kind of see the seasons of training change while you're in it.
Yeah, I noticed the Army's the same exact way.
Yeah.
We had, I think it was red phase, white phase, then blue phase was the Army thing, right?
Yeah,
It's like, I think the Marine Corps calls it like Hell Week or something like that, or what, it's, your first few weeks in the Army, it's, it's just, for lack of a better word, it's balls to the wall, right?
It's a blur.
Exactly. Then it gets a little easier because rifle qual and everything else, you're learning how to shoot your weapon.
Right.
And then the finals is basically D and C. Your final weeks, you're actually learning how to do everything properly to a T, and then graduation. So the Marines and the Army are very, very similar, but very, very dissimilar in some
We're both
ways.
ground forces, right? So a big part of what the Army does is ground. A big part of what we do is ground.
Exactly.
But it's just the culture, right? The Marine Corps is a cult, for lack of better terms.
It's a brotherhood for sure.
Yeah. And then the Army doesn't have the extent of our esprit de corps or our history, but it's small but fierce.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and that's one of the biggest reasons why the Marine Corps has such a strong following and a strong respect, right? I mean, they demand it. The training is hard.
We do demand a lot of the Marine Corps.
So, I tell some of the people that, and I don't want to make this about me, but I do want to tell a story, and I might have even mentioned it on the podcast before. But when I was in Iraq, we had taken a base over from the 4th ID, and the Marine Corps were the guys and gals that were the ones that were pulling guard duty on all these what we called Saddam towers.
Right.
And I got this one Marine, he's an E5, and he and I are in this one tower, and this is my first time on guard duty
Right.
ever in a war zone. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I hope he knows what he's doing and where he's looking because I am lost as I could possibly be.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to this NCO in the Marine Corps, and he's just stone cold. I mean, he is like as robot as RoboCop,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, he is just focused 100%. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm profiling the military or the Marine Corps at this point. I'm
Yeah.
like, all Marines are robots.
Yeah.
They're just so focused on this one thing. They don't have time to talk or
Right.
tell you what you need to do. You need to figure it out. We got off of guard duty, and this is no joke. We get down off the guard tower. He puts his arm around my back, and he's like, "Don't worry, Sergeant. We got it, man.
Yeah, yeah.
We got it." And I'm like, "You could have told me that 9 hours ago. I would have,
Yeah.
lack of crap in my pants. I was
He
scared
was
to
testing
death.
you
Right?
too. Yeah. Profiling you. Yeah.
So, but no, I mean, we wound up communicating, and they passed it off to us very, very
Right.
well. But I found a whole new level of respect for the
Yeah.
Marine Corps. So I tip my hat to you. I think it's a great. It takes a great man or woman to find that spot in their life where they're like, I'm going to join the Marine Corps,
Right.
regardless if your parents did or your grandparents or whatever, right? Or if your dad tells you if you're going to join one, you need to join the Marine Corps. It takes you, the individual, to make the decision.
Yeah, you have to make a
and
decision.
and
Yeah.
that to me, I cowered it out. I mean,
No, I don't think it's a coward thing. I think it's just we all have our pathways, right? And we all need certain things.
right.
And I think it's just what I needed at the time.
That's right.
And I think I have the mentality for it.
I
And
got
so,
you.
but I'm not as lean, I'm not as mean as I used to be. But I guess I'm still a Marine. So
Hey, absolutely.
yeah.
So what was your MOS?
Yeah, so I was an aviation electrician on Harriers. I was a smart Marine.
Okay.
A 5-year enlistment because of that, because of so much more training than your traditional Marine gets. It's a 4-year enlistment. And so it's a very small part of the Marine Corps, the Harrier community.
Okay.
It's only really 2 places in the Marine Corps, North Carolina and Arizona. And they're actually in the midst of being phased out of the Marine Corps. It's
The Harrier is?
Yeah, the Harrier.
So explain a little bit of what for the people who are watching or listening. What is a Harrier?
Yeah, so if you've seen True Lies, it's the jet that's used in that. It's a jet that it's called V-stall, but it can hover to take off and hover to land. You use that capacity, the landing mainly. The takeoff, it doesn't hover to take off because you have to have low fuel in it and
Right.
stuff like that. You can't have ordnance on it. But it's really, at the time when I was in the Marine Corps, they called it the Street Fighter because it could you could put it on a small deck boat. It was a naval ship. It could get close to countries. It could fly out of there, in-flight refuel, then come back and land on
Okay.
a very limited-sized aircraft, not carrier, but larger ship.
I got you.
And my time in the Marine Corps saw the evolution of the Harrier because they instituted a targeting pod that had not existed on that airframe before. It's called the Lightning Pod.
Okay.
It was a resource and a technology the Air Force had, but it basically allowed the Harrier itself to laze its own targets. It put more advanced forward-looking infrared on it,
Okay.
and it really changed the game. During the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, my understanding is it became a really good resource to find IEDs and stuff because of the strength of the flare. It has a lot of extra avionics, so it's a slower aircraft, not a dogfighter. It's a bombing aircraft.
Okay.
And so it had some really good capacities that were leveraged during Iraq and Afghanistan because it was attached to the Muse. So the Muse we deploy on the Marine Corps is a Marine Expeditionary Unit,
Yep.
where you shove a bunch of Navy and Marine Corps resources together, and it's basically America's 911 service around the world.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a real versatile aircraft. It's probably the most versatile jet because it doesn't need a lot. It can be deployed with helicopters and still do jet things.
Right.
And so yeah, it's you Google it. It's an interesting aircraft. It can do some things that other aircraft can't do. But yeah, that was the community I was in, and I was an electrician on it. So I worked if it had wires or had lights on it, then that was our job.
Okay.
So basically troubleshooting, which is it's broke, go fix it.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So the new F-35
is replacing the Harrier. Yes.
Okay. That's where I was going with it because the avionics are somewhat similar, right?
They are. I mean, it'll all be new age stuff.
Oh, of course.
The maintenance world has changed, whereas you could argue that some of the equipment we had was like bus-like equipment. This will be sports car equipment.
Right.
But they evolved the Harrier a lot when I was in and since. But No, the F-35 it'll be a similar airframe, but it'll have different abilities based on what service is with. So the F-35 that the Marine Corps is receiving does the VSTOL hover landing and
Okay.
takeoff. The other ones don't. But I think that was the point, was they wanted to continue to have that capacity,
Okay.
but they realized the airframe was getting old. The Harry's been around for a long time.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I remember being a kid
Yeah.
and watching this thing, and I was just like, how in the world can an airplane take off like a helicopter?
It's interesting.
Without a prop.
Yeah. And I'm not an engineer or anything, but even working on the aircraft, you still question, like, I don't understand how this works at all.
Right,
But it's
exactly.
all air, and it's they just exhaust, and it's interesting.
Oh, yeah, sure. I get it. I watch a lot of Marvel and stuff like that, right? And all these John knows more about what I'm talking about, the man behind the camera, for those of you who are not familiar with the podcast. But these aircraft like in Marvel, where these props are out on the wings and these craft are just taking off, and I think all that's coming from like these the drones.
Drones technology,
and now the military's even, using drone. And I can remember some of the first ones that came out, these little small ones that you couldn't get to balance or whatever, and they would just fly all over the place.
Yeah.
To see what technology has done over the past 10 years is just incredible.
No,
Right?
it is. And it's the aviation world is no stranger to advancement and innovation. And it was a great community to be a part of for a while.
That's cool, man. I like I said, I think being in the Army or the Marine Corps, and even the Navy, between Air Force and Navy, I feel like the Army and the Marine Corps just get all the leftovers. We're just going to scrape the bottom of the barrel. We're going to let the nerds take care of everything else. But I'm not saying they're nerds, but
they're nerds.
Yeah,
but,
okay, I'm glad I've got somebody on my side.
I think it's the Marine Corps is a department of the Navy, so it's really not its own service.
Right.
But I think the idea is the Marine Corps can handle what you give it.
That's it.
It's also, somebody told me one time, is like, the Marine Corps is so good at this stuff because we really don't have stuff. We have people.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're leading and making people more lethal and making them better leaders. And then the gear or equipment we get is just to advance our people. Right. Which is the Marine.
That's it.
Whereas, the mission of the Air Force, the Navy, they have big audacious missions with a lot of technology. It's not completely people focused.
Yeah.
It's delivery focused.
Right.
Or mission focused. So it's the more I've worked in veteran services since 2011, and the more that I do this, the more I get appreciation for the different missions of the different services, because it's a combined arms effort that really brings everything together.
Okay. All right, so let's kind of pull it back together. We got off in the weeds there. That's awesome conversation. Like I said before we started the podcast, I mean, we could talk about this stuff for days.
Yeah, it's exciting.
So you're done with boot camp. So assuming you went active duty Marine Corps, right?
Yep.
So where was your duty station? Tell me a little bit about your career and all the way up to your ETS of the Marine Corps.
Yeah. So boot camp Parris Island. I joined at an odd time in the Marine Corps at the end of every summer. A lot of people join at one time, so to get you to training is somewhat difficult.
Right.
So I go through boot camp, and then I immediately go home for Thanksgiving. Then I go to Marine combat training, which is for guys like me who weren't grunts. They send you out in the woods for a while and abuse you. So did that. Following that, I went to OJT in Norfolk. They had to put me somewhere while we were waiting to class up in my my profession. Did OJT in Norfolk for a little bit, basically taking the pressure off of getting talent to the schoolhouse in Pensacola.
Sure.
I was in Pensacola for, I think, 6 to 8 months, heavy math training, aviation training. And then they sent us to North Carolina, Cherry Point, North Carolina, which is my second school and then my actual base. So they train all the Harrier guys at Cherry Point. And then I was attached to VMA 231, which is I think it's the first squadron in the history of the Marine Corps, first and oldest. The Ace of Spades, and was there for, we in the air wing, we have kind of a transient lifestyle because we're going to different places to train. So we went to Florida, Las Vegas, Yuma, Arizona, popped around, and the things I can remember are we were at a thing called CAX, which is Combined Arms Exercise. It's at 29 Palms. In California. We had deployed to do that, and while we were there, kind of the middle, this is about 2001. This is 2001. So it's kind of the pivot point in my service. We're out in the desert. I'm working night crew on the aircraft, which mainly does maintenance at night so they can fly during the day.
Sure.
It's historically all maintenance in the military is done in 2 shifts or 3 shifts.
Okay.
Um, we're out in the middle of the desert, sleeping during the day in case bands, and everybody leaves, and you have to chase aircraft in the military. Like they could break going across the country. So they're flying from California to North Carolina, and so we are the chase crew. We're like the last maintenance guys set around, so we can catch them if they break down. Conveniently, they'll break down in places like Las Vegas, Austin, Texas, like real nice spots.
Okay.
But then September 11th happens.
Oh.
And we're out in the middle of the desert, no TVs, no nothing. Our sergeant major wakes us up and is like, "We've been attacked." I don't at the time even know what the Twin Towers looks like. I'm from the Southeast. I've never been to New York.
Right.
And then quickly after that, we start training to deploy. We were already going to deploy on the next MEU. Then that MEU changed because of the the Harrier community was managing Afghanistan airspace with the Brits. We would split it south and north. So the Harriers have been in Afghanistan forever. We would just deploy out there all the time and just manage the airspace. And so September 11th happens. The next spring we're gone on the 24 MEU, 24th MEU, and we go through the Med, end up doing some support of Afghanistan. Really don't spend a lot of time there because they didn't need 6 Harriers. They were bombing it from America at the time, from Shreveport actually, and then went and sat in the Gulf for about 7.5 months, ballpark, and then did the invasion of Iraq. We were over there for 31 days in the invasion of Iraq, and then they sent us home. We'd been over there. We were supposed to be there 6 months, and I think in theater we spent about 11 months.
Oh yeah.
So I think we became real pricey for the Department of Defense to keep us in that area, and came back and just I've spoke to people about this because it was an interesting time in the Marine Corps as we were standing up the initial part of the war. All the equipment that was serviceable went overseas. Okay. And everything that was broken or needed like heavy maintenance, they basically found a squadron or a unit to just shove all the broken toys to, and they were like, they're going to fix it. And it's just, it's a logistic reality. Like we've got, and so as I remember, my command received all these broken aircraft. And so I went from being in a high tempo deployed status to coming back and just being in this ruthless maintenance status. And then there was talk of more deployments coming quickly. And I was at a time in my life where I'd been over there for so long, and then I got back, and the maintenance was just so brutal that it was just hard to like see past, like it's going to get good again. Right. And so I made the decision at the time to look into college. I was just like, I'm going to try to get off the aircraft for a while and go figure something out. I don't want to go back overseas after being there so long in this short period of time.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't have a family or anything. I mean, I had my family. I didn't have kids and a wife or anything, but it was just like, I need a break. And the maintenance just kept piling up. And so it was like I said, it was a rough time in the Marine Corps to kind of get the war machine going. And I popped out. I was like, well, and so my enlistment ended. I was accepted into college and I was gone. And so that's kind of no hard feelings, no nothing like that. It was just at a time in my life when I was like, there's more to working 12-hour nights and losing weekends all the time. And ended up in Texas for school.
Believe it or not, I'm telling you, I think a large quantity of those who have ETS'd or in-time service out of the military, especially from probably 2002 to like, I can speak to like 2000, I'd say 12 or 13. When you're deployed every other year, you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
It's going to happen again.
You're like, this is my life for the next however many years, and it's kind of funny because you literally thinking, okay, yeah, I love it. I want to do it again. Right. Okay, great. You're going to have the opportunity, right? Where you're like, I can't do this again.
Well, it's not, I don't think it's can. It's just like like you said, you can't see beyond it.
Right.
And you're like, oh God. And then you think back about and it's not, in most cases, the violence of deployment. It's just the monotony that you're just like, geez. And so, no, I think it's just, the other thing about the Marine Corps is that 75% of the people that serve in the Marine Corps get out after one enlistment.
Right.
So the Marine Corps doesn't keep people in it.
Right.
And I think looking back on if you're pushing numbers at the Pentagon level and you need aircraft fixed, you can burn through a Ben Armstrong and I get to keep the title and I get free college and they get planes in the air, and we're shake hands, we're done.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just the needs of the Marine Corps over the needs of the individual.
I got you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're out of the Marine Corps, and you've decided, or you've made the decision to go to college at this
Yeah.
point. So where did you go? What degree did you pursue? Talk
Yeah.
about that.
So I served with a lot of guys from Texas when I was in, and
Mhm.
I kind of got drawn to Texas. Spoke to my parents about it, back to my father. He was at Nicholls State for years, and they used to play a team in Texas called Southwest Texas.
Okay.
It's south of Austin, called San Marcos, and there's a river that runs through campus, and it's a beautiful part of Texas, and it's a nice little spot. And I kind of remembered it from my youth, and I was like, "What is the name of that school?" And just so happened, my mother works in academics, and she knew somebody who worked at the university. And in order to get out of the Marine Corps at the time, I had to get a letter of acceptance. I had to
Right.
prove that I was accepted to a school, and so we went on a visit. A lot of the culture that I had recognized in my peers and kind of the music and stuff that I had learned when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan with these
Mhm.
guys was all very evident, and it seemed like a great opportunity in that Central Texas area at the time. And so I just went out there and started up. And I think I was still. So when you get out, you can go on terminal leave, right?
Yep.
You can get. They basically allow you to take all your leave at once to get out. And I started school while I was still getting paid as a Marine. So the first month I was in school in August of 2004, I was a Marine until I started like on August 2, 3, and I was a Marine until the end of that month. And so
Okay.
I got out, moved there, didn't find a job, like got my feet under me for like a few weeks, and then I
Sure.
was in school.
Sure.
Which I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but it was what I did at the time, and I just pushed through school as fast as I could. Um, the one thing I will say to kind of put because you're going to ask me a little bit about my transition and what I do now and
Mhm.
everything.
That's coming.
Yeah, I was an aviation electrician on Harriers that had been to war, that had advanced electronic experience, and I got out, and all I could figure out how to do was go to college. I
Okay.
couldn't figure out how to transition that experience into a career. And I think that'll be an interesting conversation to have when we talk about the job I do now. But college was the easiest access point for me, and at the time, it just made sense. I want to be in Texas. I've got money in my bank account, and I know this will bring income monthly because it has a stipend with the GI Bill. So I'm going to go to college. Didn't see any other opportunities to leverage my experience in the Marine Corps to go find a job at the time.
Right.
There was no infrastructure there to show me my opportunities. Um, and, uh, and really, I think I was looking to kind of figure out what I had been involved in
Mhm.
for the last 5 years. And so I got an undergraduate degree in philosophy and political science.
Okay.
And I eventually started working at a gym as a maintenance guy because
Okay.
I was a maintenance guy on aircraft. I could
Right. Yeah.
fix the
Yeah.
aircraft, fix a treadmill. And the guy who owned the gym was actually a veteran. And I think our first conversation was I found like a screwdriver or something sitting around the gym. And I was like, you have a bad tool control problem. And he was like, "Were you in the military?" And he's like, yeah, he's like, "Well, my maintenance guy needs some help. So why don't you come work for me? I'll give you a free membership." And then I started working for him and worked there entire time I was school. And it was a great opportunity because I didn't really have hours, right?
Wow.
I could do class and I can go in and work when I needed to. And it kept me in shape. So
There you go.
yeah, that was kind of my high school career or my college career. I'm sorry.
So tell me a little bit about a moment in your life that helped identify who you are today.
Yeah, it's not a question I've really thought about until you sent me this.
Right.
I don't really look back at stuff like that. I kind of look forward. But no, it's an interesting. I mean, I could talk about our experience in boot camp and going to war and
Sure.
getting out and deciding to get certain education and all. But I try to figure out what was the foundation of all this stuff. And so I mentioned this earlier when I started high school in Alabama. I stopped playing football and I started wrestling.
Okay.
And I look back at that to be like the first decision I made for myself. I played football because my dad worked around football and it was what we did in our family.
Mhm.
But I was a bigger guy and I always stayed big it's a team sport, so it wasn't individually focused. And going to wrestling meant that I lost the team and it was on me.
Right.
If I failed on my own.
Sure.
Would I fail like a man or would I throw a fit? Right. And I look back at making that decision changed me physically and then allowed me to believe that I could participate in something like boot camp
Okay.
and join the Marine Corps. And so when I started looking at getting recruited or started talking to recruiters about military service, I had a real confidence about my physical ability because of doing that. And I think the individual things that I learned about myself because I went to wrestling and did an individual sport over a team sport, I was able to use those things as I've gone forward in life. And so it was maybe 3 years of my life that I wrestled, but the decision to do it and then the adversity that it created in my life led me to these other decisions and knowing that I could handle these other decisions.
Oh wow. And that's a great point, and I've definitely said it prior to this moment on this podcast many times. Life is about a lot of decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, it where you're going is based on the decision that you made 15 years ago, right? Or 5 minutes ago. Every decision that you make impacts the future. And Lord knows I've told my kids that 100
Mhm.
million times, right? I tell my wife that. I tell myself that.
Right.
It's all about making the right decision. Granted, nobody makes all the right decisions, but doing the best that you can to actually think about those important ones can definitely impact a brighter future or a darker future.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, one person in your life that you consider a mentor, tell me a little bit about that person and why you chose that person.
Yeah. So another thing I don't think about often, I do challenge myself
Mhm.
because there's a lot of conversations in the professional world about having a mentor, somebody to go to, and I don't I have that a little bit in my leadership, my organization, but I haven't ever like hammered out a professional mentor that I can go and talk to about
Right.
things, or at least I say that I haven't. And so I thought about the question, and I was like, but what where do I get mentorship? So one obviously is my father. It's a foundational mentor through his actions and his things he said. I remember those today. You know, to kind of go back to, some decisions in my life and stuff is like my father chose to do hard things.
Mhm.
And so I'm not scared to choose to do hard things because moving somewhere, not knowing anybody and stuff like that is because the example that he set. And so always a good stalwart one. But I also challenge myself with the question to say, like, okay, so beyond him, who else? Right. And um, I I'd also like to say my father was in athletics my entire life, so I was around coaches and
Mhm.
athletes that would persist and overcome things.
Sure.
And then I served in the military, and so I've been around other individuals from other walks of life that have persisted and been resilient. And I work with veterans. And so um, to give myself an out and to say where I get mentorship, I think I get it from the individuals I interact with as well. I see their examples, I learn from what they do. I see people persevere in situations when it seems almost like you couldn't. I've seen people start businesses and grow their businesses. And so I think we're all lucky to be surrounded by potential mentors if we're just paying attention.
Mm.
And so I appreciate you asking me this question because it's opened me up to be more intentional about it and to say, yes, my father and the things that I do are very based on things I learned from him. But as I go through life, it might not be that I have to go identify a person that's an older man that was successful in business to be my
Right.
mentor. I can look everywhere and find mentorship. And I think the last thing I'll say is that one thing I learned in the military was to ask.
Mhm.
Is if you don't know it, you don't know it, and you're not in trouble if you don't know it because nobody ever told it to you.
Right.
And so I think a lot in my professional career in my life, I try to just ask people that are either at the place that I want to be, or they're doing something that I'm interested in doing, or I don't know how to do, and I just ask. And often people would love to talk about themselves, like I've done for a long time because you've asked me.
Right, exactly.
But asking people is an easy way to get information and to get mentorship. And so, one thing I would tell veterans and those that are maybe looking for opportunities to excel or transition in their lives from one thing to another, is like, understand people have jobs and they have schedules, but it doesn't hurt to ask and then ask that person to give you some time to give you that information.
Sure.
And so I think in thinking about mentorship, those are the two things that came to mind.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. I know 9 out of 10 people who come on here actually utilize their father or their mother as a
Yeah.
mentor, or some kind of relative. That's the first that we've actually heard someone say, everybody that you talk to is typically, has the potential to be
Yeah.
a mentor. And that kind of made me, cock my head to the side and made me think about it for a second. That's a really, really great point,
Yeah.
in making sure that we conduct ourselves in such a manner to where we could potentially be a mentor for others. That's really great stuff. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
No, I mean, it's just like watching people touch the stove. If they get their hand burned, don't touch the stove.
That's
That's mentorship. So,
absolutely.
no, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. And like I said, I challenged myself with it, and I wanted to uh, I'll find, and because I know I hear things and I
Mhm.
see things, and I change my activities, I was like, well, who's giving me that mentorship? Well, the people around me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Your transition seems really, really easy. I mean, was it as easy as you make it sound?
I don't think so. I think I also got out during a stop loss, and I didn't want to really go into that because it's kind of a very unique thing. But
Right.
when I got out of the military was not allowing people to get out.
Yeah, I know.
And then in theory, what I did was I always, not a great student, but I'm tricky. So I went and looked into what could get me out during that thing, and the college thing was there. And
Okay.
so that's what I leveraged to get out because I was just ready to go. And I would tell you that, on paper, it was I was doing something. I was immediately doing something. I was out of the Marine Corps. I was in class.
Right, exactly.
So I had a task and purpose.
There you go.
However, when you think about, just to sprinkle this in, I didn't process or get health care until 5 years later. I had free VA health care. I didn't participate in it. I didn't do my disability claim until I was out of graduate school.
Oh,
So
my.
until
Okay.
September or till 10 or 11, right? So it's just I didn't participate in the things that people are participating in as they exit now
Right.
as part of the infrastructure. I also, it's not PTSD or suicidal ideation or traumatic brain injury. I had anger problems. I think it's because you switch from one culture to the other so
That's
quick.
right.
I'm a big proponent of group therapy sessions. There was a lot of stuff going on at a community level for OIF and OEF veterans,
Okay.
post 9/11 veterans at the time in the communities. Texas was one of the number one states for people to return to getting out of the military, and so I participated in stuff like that. It wasn't what was me. It was just like these kids, the things that we say as a group of veterans is like, man, these kids don't care. They're not participating in school at the level they should be. And I had to realize how to compartmentalize my experience. And I mean, they're just out of high school. Like,
Right,
what
yeah,
do I
sure.
expect of them? And so I had some really good engagement in the first 6 months that I got, first 2 semesters, first 6 months with some counseling
Okay.
and just meeting other veterans um and and figuring out my anger and then kind of trying to be proactive with my passion or my zeal
Okay.
as opposed to like taking it out on other people because they weren't participating or they were against the war
Yeah.
and stuff like that, which is it's just not a tree to bark up. And
Right.
so I mean it was I mean and then professionally there's some difficulties dealing with I had that hard experience as an electrician on aircraft, and I'm working on treadmills. And so every once in a while, you can be like, what am I doing with my life?
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
But I think I was able to compartmentalize and say, okay, you're getting your education,
Mhm.
which will lead to something. You're making decent money. You're in a fun place. You got activities to do. And I think, and it's something we tell people now, sometimes you have to take a step sideways to take a step up.
That's right.
Right. And so I think I had to refine myself and learn more to get where I needed to go. But yeah, what I mean, it's not there was no ghost or, any horrible things, but it wasn't all
Okay.
it was taxing.
Right. I can definitely see where there would be some difficult times
Yeah.
in there, and especially when you're questioning yourself, like you said.
Yeah.
What am I doing? What am I gonna do? Where am I
Right.
gonna go?
Yeah.
And even now today, and I'm speaking for the veteran community.
Yeah.
All however many millions of us. So there's times in our lives, even after we ETS out and we're established, right? We're just like, what am I doing?
Right.
What am I gonna do? And I'm wondering if it all stems back to that, when we were in the military, we had an end goal. We knew where we were going constantly. We were being told the communication was on
Mhm.
point. Now that we're out and it's years later, so I've been out since 2008 or whatever, and I still go through these moments. I'm just
Mhm.
like, I need to make sure that I'm prioritizing my week,
Yeah.
my days, my minutes, my seconds, because if I don't, it's almost like I have an anxiety attack,
Right.
because I don't know what's next. And there's a large community, a population out there that are probably going through this same thing. In your experience, and I know you're not a doctor by any
Yeah.
means, but what has helped you in those times of confusion or need?
No, I think it's government training produced anxiety, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's a really good question. For me, I compartmentalize the heck out of everything, right? Understand what it is, whether it's emotional or like you got to get out of town because there's a hurricane coming.
Right.
Like compartmentalize it, just do the mission. I think that's something, as long as you can always go back to your foundational things you learned in your service, it's boot camp level stuff, right? Like you can get through everything because you understand what resiliency is and you understand how to deliver, right? You understand how to like set tasks, do those tasks to get to your goal. And I think, I mean, it sounds so simple, but with all the complexities of self-help and everything that's out there, I think if you could just write a list, accomplish a list, see a tangible return of your efforts, then you'll be happy. And I think the other thing is that you've got to create some kind of mission for yourself.
Absolutely.
I think that's the one thing you alluded to it, but we're a joint group of people that have the same mission. And that when you're in the military and losing that, we don't talk overtly about that often.
Right.
But it's and I think that's why Marines have such hard times sometimes transitioning because we're all such aggressive.
Sure.
We're locking each other on all the time while in service.
Yeah.
And then you get out and you're trying to lock on civilians and they're like, dude, you're a jerk. Like stop. But no, I think it's there's so many great lines out there like discipline equals freedom. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to rely on the foundational basic building blocks of your military career and going out. The other thing is that the mission piece, get involved in your community, find a service organization to get involved in, find another mission that's not in your job. If it's adopted children, if it's homeless, if it's something like that, find that. And what I've done either on purpose or by accident, and I've kind of combined my role that I'm in now with my passion.
Okay.
And I was thinking about this when you sent these questions, and I've never really thought about that, but they're kind of one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been helpful for me because I still have a mission. They hadn't really changed, and I'm still helping people, and I'm getting paid to do it. So,
there you go.
Yeah,
that incentive always helps. Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So you're done with college, okay, and then you're pursuing a career. What stage through graduation and then I don't know. Tell me walk me through whether it was days, weeks, months, years that brought you to next stop.
Yeah, so it took a few years. I think I got out of college and I was offered the opportunity to start a small business.
Okay.
We had some initial conversations with the gentleman who ran the gym I'd worked at, and he saw that I could do the same thing bigger, like regionally. He's like, you could get certified in equipment repair. And he goes, I'll help you stand it up, and I'll let you have this business. This will be your business. And I just was like, I don't want to be an equipment repair guy. Like I didn't see the evolution from doing that to maybe owning a business.
I got you.
I just didn't have it in me at the time. My parents lived in Alabama, and I'd been away from my parents for basically 11 years. I'd seen them at holidays and stuff like that, but I hadn't lived around them.
Sure.
And so I was just like, I don't want to keep working at the gym. I don't want to go do this business thing. I could have done it, just didn't tickle my fancy at the time. And so I talked to my parents and I was like, what if I came back to Alabama and just was around and I spoke to somebody and they're like, well, you could look into grad school. And particularly I was interested in public and nonprofit leadership stuff, like mission related work, that I didn't see a lot of professionalism in. So like government leadership and stuff like that.
Sure.
And so I was like, well, I've got the passion because I served the country, and then I also have some education. But what if I went and got like the MBA version for government?
Okay.
What if I did that? And so found out I had a little bit more GI Bill left, so I was able to get grad school for free. And so I moved back in to Birmingham near my parents, and took on basically a handyman job and kept doing maintenance related stuff. So leveraging my military experience, just not to the wet level I thought I could. And then got my graduate degree in public administration, master's in public administration. While I was there, got connected with a colleague of my father's that was doing a summer youth employment program, so a workforce program.
Yep.
Needed some help with that. I was able to engage with that, really kind of started building out some budgeting and administrating skills with government funding. So it was right in line with what I was going to school for. That was a great program. It was during the recession when Obama took office, and we were first year 300 people, 16 to 21 We helped them find work. We paid their salaries, and then they were working with companies to kind of like, it was like a paid internship basically.
Okay. Okay.
But the people were like, we need bodies, but we don't have the money to pay for them, and so we facilitated that.
Right.
And a lot of bringing kids in that are 16 that didn't have any kind of work experience and getting them to careers, which was kind of the
Sure.
beginning that gets me to next. That's when I first get that workforce bite. And then the second year, these were kind of basically summer programs, so we kind of go dormant during the fall. We put 700 people to work, and so it was like it was a great validator of the education I was going through, and it really
Okay.
lined up where I was doing projects in school that were basically, or for my graduate degree, they were basically the work I was doing every day. So it was,
Right.
I got very lucky that that lined up, and then um, graduated spring of 11 and was looking to get back to Texas. I'd met a woman. I was interested in, like, she had lived in Birmingham her whole life. And I was like, you got to go experience other things. And I started looking in Texas, was talking to a few people. And then out of nowhere, my mother, who was in education, she worked at a university for my entire life, or universities.
Right.
She was like, you should look in higher education, see if there's any roles that would make sense for you there. Uh, University of Texas at Austin, look, they're hiring a director, or they're hiring a veteran program coordinator.
Okay.
And I was like, well, that's me. Like,
Hmm.
I've been through 2 degrees. I've walked through the different doors a veteran has to walk through in education. And they were standing up a program, and I applied and quickly got an interview. Went into Austin to interview, 8-hour interview, different groups of people. Higher education is real bad about extensive interviewing of people.
Gosh.
I went through it, felt real good about it, and quickly got hired. And at the end of October of 2011, I started as their first veteran employee
Okay.
at the University of Texas Austin. And over the next few years, I built their veterans program.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was interesting. We had about 5,000 veterans on campus, plus about 2,500 people that are attached to veterans, dependents,
Okay.
that were using their benefits and everything. And it was really, it every university at that time, 2011, 2012, 2013, was dealing with such an influx of military associated students that
Mhm.
had benefits, and the benefits were changing. And so the universities all were dealing with heavy, not crisis, but just like cultural shifts around how to process the benefits.
Sure.
And it was a great time for me because I had gotten my graduate degree. I liked adversity and chaos. That's what they had. And I was able to work. I mean, I had a million interactions with veterans that were attempting to go to UT Austin, that were going to UT Austin, that were having financial difficulties or cultural difficulties of going back into school. And it was a real rewarding time for me. I eventually got promoted a few times, became their director of veteran services. And it was, it really, I cut my teeth aggressively in the veteran services space, and I got so much experience with, I became a belly button for 7,000 people,
Oh
a
goodness.
belly button for services, right? So if they needed
Right.
something, they'd come to me, and it was merely because of where I was, fact
Okay.
and function of just being the guy that had the door that was open.
Sure.
But I think back about 10,000 hours in these things we hear, and it's like I got them all right there.
Mhm.
I think the busiest day I had was like 68 people. Like, people were waiting at my parking spot when I showed up to talk to me about their issues. I had a line of 15 people out the door when I got to my office, and then I just wrote down everybody I met with that day, just to, because I was in the middle of a fight and I wanted to see what
Right.
I was doing.
Absolutely.
And it was so it really developed me to understand veteran needs at a high level. Yes, they were in education, but this was many people who were just attempting to go somewhere would come and talk to me
Right.
because I was the guy with the door open. And it really helped me understand what's possible and, understand the needs of veterans as they transition.
Sure.
Um, while I was working there, had a desire to get back to Louisiana, wanted to get closer to family. That my wife's family and my family are both in Alabama. Wasn't ready to move back to Alabama, and so we started looking at opportunities. And through a Marine Corps connection, I was introduced to, and then eventually hired by the deputy mayor of public safety in New Orleans, to be to do a Homeland Security finance job,
Oh wow. Okay.
another public admin related job. So for a few years, I worked with Orleans Parish, Plaquemines Parish, St. Bernard Parish, and Jefferson Parish to run kind of their regional consortium of Homeland Security and emergency preparedness funding and purchasing and stuff. Basically, as a plug and play administrator for this funding and this program, got me a lot of experience with grant and more federal money experience. During that time, I got involved with the New Orleans VFW. For a while, the New Orleans VFW was the second fastest growing VFW in the nation. I know a lot of people will think about a VFW and be like, "It's just a smoky old place with guys drink."
No,
it's different in New Orleans. So we had an old building. We had a real desire to renovate and build a new VFW, and it was really led by young post 9/11 veterans, Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, and got involved. Didn't choose to, but was put in leadership. And so I kind of matriculated through leadership while I was working at the city. And I started learning that there was a real gap in veteran services in the state of Louisiana. There was nobody doing veteran employment. There was nobody doing this. There was nobody doing that. And so reconnected with some of my peers in Texas, which is about 10 years ahead of everybody when it comes to veteran services, merely because of the amount of people that are returning to Texas after service, and was like, hey, what are some options to get what you're doing? And the guy, he was the executive director of Next Stop, which is a veteran employment nonprofit. I was like, we got nobody doing what you do here. He was like, well, let's put together a pitch deck and let's go see if we can find money. And he's like, we need about $100,000 to expand our services. And they were looking to expand. Next Stop was founded in Houston. It's a very powerful veteran service or veteran employment organization. And so in a few months, we found the money to expand, and I was hired for my good deeds. And I've been with Next Stop since the end of 2017.
Oh, wow. All right, so that brings us into Next Stop. Tell me, first of all, what is your mission statement at Next Stop?
That's a great question. Next Stop, our mission is to recruit, develop, and place post 9/11 E3 to E7 veterans. Why do we focus on that population? They're 80% of the people that get out of service each year. So they're the biggest population that's exiting service. They're also the people that do a majority. They're the gears that make the military work.
Okay.
And if you look at what the talent workforce needs are in America, it's those people they're looking for, the touch labor.
Absolutely.
Right. Secondarily, we work with that population because research says that they're the ones that need the most assistance.
Okay.
In kind of meeting their post-military career ability. So what do? So we recruit them, right? So we try our best to get as far upstream with the individual as they get out of service. These are people that have spent anywhere from 5 to 10 years in service. And you know who they are.
Yep.
And the two realities is that they don't know how to translate their experience, and they don't understand civilian career infrastructure.
Right.
They don't understand what businesses do. They don't know what their name. They don't know the acronyms, et cetera.
Absolutely.
So it's either them as they're getting out or the people that are in their first few years of service. Research says that 61% of people that exit the service are underemployed for their first 2 years out of service. They get jobs, not careers, because they need to just replace the funding that they're losing.
That's it, yeah.
And so we were really invested in those people. We know they have skills. We know they have the desirable things that employers need. And so we're trying to help to grab them and advance them. We develop them. Development could look like getting them a credential or explaining them what education is. Or we talked about this a little bit earlier. Hey, if you go in this career field, this person's going to hire you, then train you once you're hired.
That's right.
And so we're looking at them to advance themselves beyond just their skills. Now, if they've got a really good niche skill set, like you're an electrician, let's just get them a job as an electrician.
That's right.
But if they were a tank mechanic and you want to be a diesel mechanic, well, there's bridges there.
That's
right? And then last is place. So a big part of what we do is work with employers like Performance to try to help them meet their talent needs. And in a perfect world, we would take the individual veteran, we would refine them, and we would help them understand what they're selected, and we would introduce them to one of our employers so they could be hired.
Right.
And so that's kind of our mission and what we're focused on. The words, but also the meaning behind those.
I got you. Yeah. So where is Next Stop? So tell me where it was founded and where has it branched to now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we were founded in Houston in 2015 at a big Houston, #1 city of returning veterans.
That's right.
Huge gap of trigger pullers and people getting out of the service, not finding the type of careers they were looking for. So a former Marine platoon leader and some energy executives came together and founded this organization, really just to focus on this population.
Okay.
The guy's name is Donovan Campbell, who is kind of the brainchild of this organization. He wrote a book called Joker 1 about his experience as a as an infantry officer in the Marine Corps. And his whole thing was like, these machine gunners I have are probably some of the best men I've met, and they can do anything. But they get out and on their resume it says they're machine gunners,
Right.
and like an oil company might not hire them because of that, because they don't understand their complete abilities.
Exactly.
And so we really focused on energy to begin with, oil and gas. So between 2015 and 2017, they operated in Houston, and they I think they placed 1,000 veterans in that time frame. Just real hyper, basically a nonprofit that acts like a recruitment firm for our partner organizations. And then they started looking into expanding in 2017. It alludes to the story that I told you, where I started talking to the executive director.
Okay.
And I helped find funding to expand them to Louisiana. We expanded into Louisiana because of similar career and industry fields as they have in Houston. A lot of connectivity between them, just like performance is operating in both places.
Right.
So it made sense. It also made sense that we could expand into a larger area, because that there's more veterans in the city of Houston than there is in the state of Louisiana.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so it gave us some ability to go out in rural areas and do some different things that were interesting at the time with federal funding and everything like that. And then since then, we kind of operate throughout Louisiana, Mississippi, and the Gulf Coast to Northwest Florida. We have an employee that lives in and works in Eastern North Carolina, with a large bases are out there.
Yeah.
And then we have our executive directors in Washington, D.C., and our development directors in Wisconsin. I think we work across like 40 bases nationally.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we're kissing in with talent from here, from other places, to go work at those bases. Again, to recruit and also to bring the message of our employers as far upstream as we can. And so that's what we look like. We're looking at other expansion territories as we go in the next years. There's a few places in the Southeast that have aggressive talent signals that they just don't have enough people there to do the jobs that they have. Two that come to mind are like West Tennessee and North Alabama. And we're looking at opportunities to expand our services up there, both to grow us geographically, but also to bring on new employees to kind of serve those communities.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. It seems like Next Stop's got a great direction. I know we have worked very hard with Next Stop, and with the goal of trying to put veterans to work.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yes, we are an industrial construction company, right? But it's almost as if, one of our main jobs, not just servicing the client, but servicing our communities, our families, our veterans, our military. The whole transition period coming out of the military is a struggle. It has been ever since the beginning of time, right? When you're going from a directive such as combat or whatever the case may be, and you're just dumped off, on your family, or you're on the street, whatever the case may be, you need someone to just, figuratively take you up, grab your hand, give you a good talking to, and say, look, there is a future. You can't see it right now. Let me help you, right? And I know Next Stop takes a big part of that burden away, because you're identifying these companies and saying, look, these people are looking for veterans just like you. Give them that sense of security, that initiative, and that drive. And I want to thank you for that, because Lord knows we've had that problem for many years, and Next Stop and Performance is actually doing something about it.
No, you've stumbled onto something that the research actually shows is important. So the Call of Duty Foundation, the video game, they do research around veteran employment. That's the way they've decided to go with their giving and their research, is just employment of veterans as the exit service. Yeah, so they do an annual survey, and that annual survey or annual report, it says that you are 2 times more likely to get the job that you want if somebody reviews your resume with you. 2 times more likely. You're 3 times more likely to get the job that you want if someone coaches you through the process. So we're literally putting butts behind that data, right? And so our case managers. So what does it look like for the veteran, right? So the veteran signs up for us as an organization, and then one of our case managers reaches out, and it's basically their concierge throughout their career search. We like to say they're in the foxhole with them. They're like-minded individuals who've been through the process that can help them translate their experience, but also understand where their experience can plug it into the civilian industrial complex, right?
Okay.
What industry or what kind of career field. They get 8 hours on case management apiece on average. If you want to participate more, then you go ahead, but that's what you're going to get just through research of our participation with people. resume assistance, interview assistance, connection to mentorship, connection to people at companies like you,
Sure.
um, and then eventually placement. And so I think it's it's what we see ourselves. Our mission is to bridge the gap and to be the strong, or our vision is to be the strongest link between military veteran talent and industry,
Mhm.
right? And how do we do that? We help you understand who they are and how to access them, while we also help refine them based on what the research says they'll make more successful,
Okay.
and then hand them to employers. So it's a, the sad reality is that the problems that you've kind of touched on, but the same individual today that was me as an aviation electrician
Sure.
that gets off the Harrier that walks out, they're going to get a week of transition training on how to write their resume, and then they're going to get sent back to wherever they go. And they're going to be on their own to go figure out where they can apply their trade, for lack of better terms,
Okay.
with no understanding of how to translate it, what they did in the military,
Right.
and then no understanding where they can plug into. And so efforts like this and relationship like this are very important, because what it does is it just shortens that runway.
Absolutely.
And it takes that 61% of underemployment and it drives it down. And that's what we're here for, is to create that connection, but also, like you said, is to help people access this talent that they want to access so much.
Absolutely. Giving people the knowledge, and not just people, but or not just veterans, but people in general, the knowledge, and to know that there's companies out there, especially Next Stop. We're focusing on you guys, what you're doing for those veterans. But if you, I try to break everything down, and what you're doing for the family, which is the husband or
Yeah.
wife, their children, their grandparents, because you're affecting everyone in a family if you put one person to work.
Yeah.
You're providing them with an option to go work with a company that's gonna put a roof over their head, that possibly could pay, their doctor bills, whatever the case may be. The incentive is there, and you guys have, literally just taken it up and given direction and drive. So, thank you for that.
No, thank you.
I think that pretty much covers it. Again, I want to thank you for what you do with Next Stop, what Next Stop does for performance, and we're going to continue to build this relationship for sure, and with the ultimate goal to put as many veterans as we possibly can to work. Not necessarily just with performance, but even if there's veterans out there who are looking for work and needing to go to work, right? We've got relationships with other construction companies as well as you do, and with that ultimate goal to put these individuals to work. So again, I want to thank you. Is there any closing statements you'd like to
No,
make?
no, I would like to highlight performance as a leader in this space. I want to thank the organization for its continued investment and this focus on this population. I think everybody has a talent problem right
Yeah.
now post COVID. I think we need leaders in the space to show people how to solve talent talent problems with either programming or investment.
Right.
And Performance Contractors has been a stalwart in this space, and investing dollars and looking at opportunities and collaboration to help this population. So we couldn't do the work that we do without organizations like Performance. And I think it's not only refreshing to see the investment
Mhm.
that Performance has made in this, both you know through effort and through energy, but also it's challenging.
Sure.
It's challenging to work with organizations like yours that wants to do more and more and more, and it keeps us on our toes, and it helps us evolve the whole ecosystem.
Right.
So things like this, getting the word out through a podcast, your efforts to kind of challenge us, be like, hey, we need these kind of bodies now, and this kind of
Sure.
thing. I think continue to do that, and I hope that other companies learn from your efforts, because this is a population worth investing in. One of the realities that we see all across Louisiana and the Southeast is people tell us there's three problems with people they try to hire these
Mhm.
days. One, they can't show up to work on time. Two, they don't know how to act in a workplace.
Right.
And three, they can't pass a drug test. Right?
Right.
With this population, you get all of those opposite. So you can pass a drug test
Yep.
because it's part of the community and culture.
That's right.
Sure. And you know how to operate in the workspace. Hell, you've got training on it.
Yeah.
And then last is that you know how to show up to work on time.
Yeah.
As you alluded to it earlier, if we don't, we get anxiety because that's how
Exactly
we were
right.
trained. But no, it's been an awesome time talking to you about this, and I can't say it enough how great performance has been in here, and just excited to continue working with y'all and keep impacting this community.
Awesome. Well, Ben, again, I want to thank you for coming, and I want to thank you for what you do for Next Stop, and I want to thank you for what you're doing for performance as well, and not just performance, but the entire community, the states that you guys are working in, and our country.
All right.
Right. So thank you very much. And I'm going to try to have some stuff posted on here about Next Stop. Maybe you can see it whenever you're viewing it. And don't forget, we're not doing this for any Glory to performance or Next Stop. We're doing this for the individuals who are actually tuning in, right? The men and the women, the children, the parents, the grandparents who care to know more. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to provide that information. So make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and we'd love to read and check things out in the comments. So this is Mike Favre signing off.